Welcome back to the Refreshing Leadership Podcast with me, Maya Gudka. Today, I am joined again by Adam Kingl for part 2 of our conversation. And here's why I think this is a really refreshing conversation, both about leadership and about food. When it comes to food, I think we can often put it into typical categories. What is quick and easy? What is healthful or what meets body composition goals? And of course, there are other things related to that, like detox and other, in inverted commas, healthful trends. But what we actually see in our work, both Adam and I, is leaders struggling with sustained energy, having to function at a high level for long periods of time. And remember, this podcast actually started as a nutrition podcast with my co-host Arti. It's always great to hear from somebody who's done the research around this, because there are always extra studies that show side benefits that you've never really thought of. And that's what I really got from this conversation. I've personally noticed in the last few months, since I've been much more regular and diligent and prepped about having my baked oats ready to go, I feel much more energized and stable throughout the day. So if you're already pretty good when it comes to your food habits, but maybe you'd like to give it a bit of a refresh, or you want to know what's working well, why, where you can level up without a huge amount of extra effort, this episode is for you. We're going to be talking about the practicalities of eating habits, whether you're in the office, working from home, traveling for work, the reality of what we can do in those different situations for that sustained energy. And I'm going to now dive into the conversation with Adam. Adam, welcome back to the Refreshing Leadership Podcast. It would be great to dive into the typical behaviors and patterns that you're seeing, Adam, that might have led you to create this book.
So I once heard a sports coach came onto an executive education program, and he said the only difference really between a professional athlete and a professional executive is that the athlete enjoys recovery time. And I think that's very true, right? The athlete has short bursts of energy followed by periods of recovery, whereas the high performing business professional just goes full on every day, 5 to 7 days a week. So I would suggest that the corporate athlete's greatest asset is therefore stamina, remaining focused and energetic through meetings, being composed under pressure, being able to think strategically even when the pressure is to be short term all the time. That all requires reliable energy throughout the day, and energy dips contribute to poor decision making, diminished effectiveness, longer term. Other side of the equation, we know that leaders where their followers describe them as energetic, they also, funny enough, have other positive correlations with how their teams describe them. More collaborative. They lift the emotional life of the group and its dynamics. They often communicate more engagingly. Often people who are more energetic are perceived to be more confident, to be able to lead change and drive results, etc. So I think sustained energy is one of the huge states that we spend a good amount of time on the book. And of course, there are other elements that will contribute to that beyond nutrition: exercise, recovery, rest, hydration. But sustained energy, I really call sustained energy the art of avoiding the metabolic roller coaster. So how do we not chase the fleeting rushes that come from simple sugars? How instead do we ensure a steady, reliable release of fuel for lasting physical and mental endurance? And if you want, I can go through some examples of what that might mean in terms of
Yes,
what we
please.
eat.
Yes.
So the cornerstone of this strategy is consuming low GI carbs, so low glycemic index carbohydrates. These break down slowly. In other words, it provides a steady trickle of sugars into the bloodstream instead of a sudden flood, which is then followed by the subsequent energy crash after a meal. So that's one. The second is dietary fiber, soluble fiber, oats, barley, for example. This forms, and this is going to sound really lovely, a viscous gel in the gut. But these kinds of gels slow carbohydrate absorption. And again, you get the slow trickle. So we have, for example, a recipe in the book for homemade granola. Why homemade? Why don't I just buy a bag of granola? Because I'm going to get the oats that way. Well, you are controlling the simple sugars, which that bag of granolas in the store is probably filled with tons of salt and refined sugar. Also to the granola, I would add nuts and seeds, right? And that's giving me the protein and the vitamin B's, which is also great for energy throughout the day. Savory porridge. We often think about porridge just as something you eat in the morning. What about having porridge in the afternoon, right? At work. Bring some cold pre-made porridge with you. Add a little extra water or broth to rehydrate it, to thin it down, and to warm it up. And then add some crushed nuts and seeds, maybe some diced tofu, maybe some fresh raw vegetables, like some finely chopped cauliflower or broccoli or whatever you like. And all of a sudden, you're getting this nutrient bomb, which is also going to improve your focus, not just your energy, particularly if you're eating things like folate, which is in cucumber and leafy greens. Um, or for example, add some oats, some cooked pureed oats to soups, just as a thickener. So rather than just a simple cornstarch slurry or a roux, which is flour and butter, which thickens lots of soups and things. What about some pureed cooked oats? Does the same thing, but now all of a sudden it's improving your ability to avoid the post meal glucose curve and provides prolonged fuel for the body and the brain.
Oh, I love that. I'm so glad that you've given oats such a moment, right? Because I feel like they've had a tricky ride over the last few years. Because actually, with a lot of the blood sugar, blood glucose type stuff, there was, I've tried the monitors and things, the glucose monitors, and they can register a bit of a spike, right? Because spikes are not a bad thing. And so I feel like there was a period where they were sort of being shunned as not the things to have in the morning because they can create these spikes. But I've certainly found that creating a balanced overnight oats with other things in it as well, like you say, that kind of maybe the good fats and protein, and suddenly they're very much back on the table, and you just feel good after oats, compared
Yeah.
to some of, if you want to make the same recipe but with normal flour. I just feel better after oats. I just
Yeah.
feel different. And so, we all have different sensitivities as well, don't we? And I think some of us are a little bit sensitive to flour versus something like oats, which is just so soothing. I mean, the fact that, if your kid has a bit of eczema, you're recommended to put them into an oat bath, right? It's just naturally one of those very soothing ones. So I'm pleased that you've given oats a moment, and I think it's nice to think again creatively about using them beyond their kind of usual breakfast use, and actually putting them where you might put other, where you might put rice or noodles, and instead. So
Yeah.
because also they're so easy to bring to life, right? All you need is some
Yes.
hot water and suddenly, they've transformed. So that's a really, I think, a lovely example. um then I guess we also have to take into account different working patterns now, right? That people have. So we've had every shade of that, haven't we? We've gone from full, working from home to now more back in the office and things like that. How would you say that your ideas and things sort of relate to those different versions of work?
Yeah. I think in returning to the office, for many of us post lockdown, I think what we've lost is maybe some of that habit we got into of cooking, preparing, and consuming our own food. It's so easy, to jump down to the sandwich shop, leave the office, grab a sandwich, and come back to work, where you're eating, as you say, lots of flour, refined sugars, very little other nutrients and vitamins that you're getting from produce, maybe not a lot of protein as well. So, one habit that I think we have to remind ourselves of as we return to the office, whether it's part time or full time, is trying to eat things where you know what you're eating. You don't really know when you're getting something off the shelf what's really in there. So much of the time people are eating from their desk at lunch. That has a whole set of issues, which we probably don't even want to get into. But and you might think, well, I don't have time to prepare something during the workday, and I'm not saying that. What I am saying is prepare something maybe on Sunday night or the night before to bring in, so that you know what you're going to have for lunch. setting you up for success. If before a big meeting, you reread all the notes for the meeting, read the report, write down some questions, you are preparing for the meeting. Well, another way you need to prepare for that important meeting is physically. Do I have sufficient energy? Do I have sufficient focus? Do I have sufficient concentration? Etc. So, also, what you're eating for lunch is going to prepare you for that. But that just means that you think about that a little bit ahead of time, and maybe be ready for that with what you're eating for lunch. You talked about let's give oats their due. I also say let's give protein its due. One thing that I discovered as I read a lot of the literature is and talked to executives about their eating habits is I think one reason why we don't have enough energy throughout the day is actually really simple. I don't think we consume enough protein, many of us. You can't just do carbs and expect that you're going to feel full and have energy throughout the day. Now, look, you don't have to be a meat eater. So vegetarian, vegan, no problem, right? There's lots of sources of protein that are not animal protein. But that is something that we've lost. I think the other point is that you talked about fats briefly, and I think healthy fats are something that we also eschew, and we're like, well, all fat is bad fat. No, 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 not at all. That's a slow burning energy source. We know that so-called HDL, right, good cholesterol, good for heart health. But here's what more recent nutrition research indicates: it's also good for the brain. HDL helps the neurotransmitters function in our brain. In other words, you can think with more stamina and more clarity if you're consuming enough HDL. Last point is the non dietary fats. So, eggs, for example. Eggs have their moment in the sun and then their decline, right? Oh, how don't eat eggs, all that cholesterol. Egg yolks in particular are a wonderful thing. I'm not suggesting eating a dozen eggs a day, but any doctor today would tell you 1 or 2 eggs a day. And most people don't eat 1 or 2 eggs a day, but 1 or 2 eggs a day, no problem. It's not going to enhance your LDL, your bad cholesterol. What it will do is it'll actually boost your HDL a little bit, but more importantly, that choline in the egg yolk is going to help your focus, and if that isn't enough, it contains lutein, which is a key ingredient for eye health. So now, which you never heard even a couple of years ago, more ophthalmologists, when people are saying, how do I just have, better optical health throughout the day? How do I maybe maintain my eye health? I don't need a new prescription all the time, etc. More and more they're saying, are you eating enough eggs?
Oh, I love that. We have arrived at the perfect length of time for popular eggs in our house, which is 7-minute boiled egg. And then it's my
Mm,
job to eat up any leftover eggs in the house. So we definitely, we definitely get through a lot of eggs. I
a
think the
pleasant
only,
duty.
pardon?
A pleasant duty,
A
having to
pleasant
eat the
duty,
rest of the
exactly.
eggs.
Because I would hate the idea of wasting an egg.
Yes.
That would be so
Yeah.
sad, right? But the only sad thing for me is, given that protein's having its moment, is realizing that it actually doesn't quite have as much protein as we once maybe thought. So that's the only disappointment.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know that it has all of these other benefits, because it has often been described as not a complete food in the sense of all macronutrients, but it contains so much
It does.
within that egg that is beneficial. So um I'll play this segment of the podcast to my son so that he's heard it from not just me. Um, but I think it's nice to just have that overview, isn't it? What's your take on traveling with meat? So I didn't grow up in a household that ate meat, so I'm always extra cautious around the way that I only have chicken and some fish. But would you pack some chicken to take
Yeah,
to yeah?
I would. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I could, a cold cooked chicken breast in a salad or on a sandwich. It's only out of the fridge for for most of us an hour and a half, let's say. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, for on a typical commute, it will be absolutely fine.
Okay. And
Yeah,
then would you
no
heat that?
problem.
Would you heat that high before you ate it?
No, not at all. Don't have to. If I'm eating
Okay.
with a cold salad, for example, I don't have to heat it. However, in episode 1, we talked about how we kind of reawaken our joy of eating with contrasts. So on a cold chopped vegetable salad, for example, I think some hot, diced chicken breast would be delicious. You don't have to, but look, we all have a microwave in the office, don't we? And certainly at home. So, I certainly probably would. It's not actually necessarily about hygiene. I think, again, I think the chicken will be absolutely fine. I think actually it just makes it more interesting in the mouth.
Yes. And this is really a question just for me. I'm still trying to make my chicken better. I use an air fryer. I try not to undercook it. I try, because I know that that's the path to rubberiness. For those of us that are still haven't nailed our chicken, right? And knowing that it is like one of the best sources of
It
protein,
is. Yeah.
and any tips that or anything in your book that you can point to?
Yeah, well, first, I want to raise the trophy for chicken. Not only a wonderful source of lean protein, it contains tryptophan, and tryptophan enhances the good, so-called good mood hormones in our body. And some people, sometimes chicken, turkey, etc., gets a bad rep because people say, "Oh, after I eat the chicken or the turkey, I feel sleepy because of the tryptophan." It's not the tryptophan that's making you feel sleepy. You're feeling sleepy because you ate too much chicken. It's just like anything when we eat, when we get sleepy after eating too much. So if after a big Christmas dinner of turkey and you go, "Oh, I'm so tired," yeah, because you ate too much. That's why. It's not the tryptophan. Tryptophan is a good mood booster. So that's another reason to eat chicken. So here's one of my go-to recipes. And by the way, this is instantly adaptable in so many ways. I'm sure listeners can figure this out, but I'm happy to talk through some variations. Take a chicken breast. Let's say you're just cooking for yourself, just for sake of argument, but you can easily multiply this and not do anything different. Put some olive oil in the pan. Yes, I cook with olive oil. I think it's ridiculous. People say, "Oh, I have to use this kind of vegetable, this vegetable oil for frying, olive oil only for drizzling on salads and whatnot." Not at all. You can absolutely fry foods in olive oil. Yes, it has a slightly lower smoking point, but you're not going to deep fry with olive oil. But otherwise, sure, go ahead. Put some olive oil in the pan, and season your chicken. Don't under season the chicken. If you want to reduce the salt, salt creates brightness in the mouth, but you can recreate that with other things. So maybe an hour before you cook the chicken, put some thyme leaves, dried or fresh, and lemon zest all over. Just rub the chicken in that and just put it back in the fridge for an hour. Even if you don't think of it an hour before you cook and just do what I've just described and then immediately put the chicken in the pan, that's fine too. But giving it that moment to let the lemon zest and the herbs kind of infuse into the meat, just that little bit extra, just gives you that little boost. Put your pan on medium. This is an area where there's lots of different people say different things, particularly around cooking meat in a pan. A lot of people say you put on a really high heat and then you turn it down. But once you sear it on the high heat, you are sealing in the juices. Sealing in the juices is a myth when it comes to super high temperature. That is not true. As a matter of fact, when you put a cold chicken breast in a super hot pan, those proteins contract hard. That squeezes the water out of the chicken breast. So just keep your pan on a moderate heat. 6 minutes on one side, turn it over, 6 minutes on the other side. You don't have to touch it. Sure, look at it, make sure it's not burning, but medium almost all the time. I can guarantee listeners, medium temperature, 6 minutes per side, it will be perfect. It will be slightly browned. The caramelization is useful. This is known as the Maillard effect. You want some caramelization of the natural sugars that are in the chicken that enhances the flavors. Take it out of the pan. Now, do not immediately wash the pan. You now have what we call in the bottom of the pan fond. Fond are the lovely brown bits that are sticking in there. It is the foundation of Western sauces after you've cooked a meat or fish protein. So now take some white wine, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, doesn't matter. Splash, just a little splash, just splash it in there, and then just take like a rubber spatula or something, and just make sure that you scrape up the fond, and then add any other flavoring you want to that. You could add, if you're not so counting calories, add a little pat of butter or a little dash of cream. Notice I'm saying a little, moderation, right? But it's just going to round out the flavors. And then squeeze a lemon juice. Again, we're adding brightness back in to the dish. It's interesting in the mouth. Always, I think we don't put enough citrus in dishes. Now, here's where you can easily create variations. Now, I've just made my sauce for my lovely chicken. Serve that with some steamed veg, some, anything you like, some roasted root veg. Right now it's springtime, so some Jersey Royal new potatoes, or whatever you have. Okay, but to that sauce, if you add some basil, you're in the chopped fresh. You're in the Mediterranean. Add some French tarragon. All of a sudden, you're in Provence. Add some uh, finely chopped lemongrass and some lime leaves, and you're in Southeast Asia. One dish, but you'll have three completely different origins and flavor profiles for your dish. So you can
Love
do
it.
so many things with that one basic recipe that uses the brilliant chicken.
Love that. Love that. I must add some garam masala and dried coriander for your Indian
Yeah,
profile as well, because that's the
exactly.
one that I tend to do a lot. So,
Perfect.
and if you were doing that in an air fryer, I think the key there is medium heat as well, and you do
Yes.
actually get all of the stuff dripping through the grill to the bottom, and I think that would be your sauce, which I then
Yeah.
quickly tend to put some fairy liquid on and
Oh
and
yeah.
soak away. So yeah,
Yeah, exactly. No, keep that. Keep
yeah.
that. Particularly the air fryer, because it's not going to be fat. It's going to be juices and it's going to be fond. So that's going to
Cool.
be the basis for a lovely sauce. Or even if you don't want to bother with sauce, whatever veggies you made or rice or pasta, toss it in those lovely brown juicy bits. And
Love
all
it.
and all of a sudden you've made something which could be quite bland, amazing.
Absolutely love it. Brilliant. Well, thank you for taking me down that in detail, because I think it's really important to, if you're going to go down a chicken route, you really need to know how to nail your chicken. And it's not, doesn't
Yeah.
come naturally for everybody. And for a lot of us, we know that it's got its benefits, and we now need to figure out our preferred style with it. So that's super helpful. Well, we've covered a lot in two conversations, Adam. Especially, we've thought a little bit about some of the habits as well. The kind of, especially now that we've moved back into the office or work, away from working from home. Is there anything else that you think it would be good to share that we've managed to touch on yet? I know that we had talked, offline about where you see people going wrong, or where people can go from being quite disciplined to then perhaps, off the rails. Is there anything on that you want to add as we wrap up the conversation?
I guess part of it is just being a little bit more mindful about what you're eating, particularly, for example, if you're on the road, right? It's easy to just start, eating very poorly and not in a way which enhance. I'm not even talking about calories, though there is that element. I'm just meaning, again, not losing track of giving yourself the right nutrients to enhance your performance, particularly for dealing with jet lag. Then sustained energy, concentration, and focus is going to be hugely important. So think about, having those, going to ordering leafy greens, right? Which is also giving you like that lutein, for example, that eggs provide as well. Going for things like the folate, right? The folic acid as well, which you might get in cucumbers and other fruits and veg. Eating an apple instead of a candy bar, right? If you just need that little boost of energy,
Mm.
you're getting natural sugars, but also you're eating a low GI, and you're getting some fiber as well from the apple, which is going to keep you full for longer. It's just that it's so a lot of it is just being a little more choiceful, particularly when things feel inconvenient, and just that tiny bit of extra preparation. Throw a couple apples in your rucksack on the way to work, or if you're abroad, hitting the salad bar of the hotel instead of the steakhouse. Those can make a huge difference. And then finally, when we're at home, is just maybe lean in a little bit more to cooking, because we know that it shouldn't be another task to squeeze into your already crowded calendar. It shouldn't be yet another chore. It's an opportunity to nourish ourselves, connect it with practice, and slow down to care for ourselves with a little bit more attention.
Oh, I love that. You have reminded me actually, as we were talking, did have a question around the eating out and the travel. So, what I've where I've reached is that I have a really good schedule at home. So, I'm kind of know what's needed, and I have a good rhythm, and therefore I'm even more conscious now of when you do eat out, or when you're away and you're away for a longer period, or when you're traveling, that actually all starts to feel a lot more challenging because
Yeah.
you're aware of the difference and how much more difficult it is to make those choices. I personally, actually, I've sort of said, I could do without restaurants. They before there's a social function, and of course, there's so much culinary excitement that can happen, but I also think that there is not enough care because there are other objectives, but that are being prioritized. There is not always enough care in terms of what it's doing for us from a nutritional perspective, and so I've sort of mentally I'm less keen, to be honest, on eating out, and even it's one aspect of travel that I don't always love, because by the end of the trip, that's when you're like, okay, I'm really done here now, and I'm completely dysregulated as well,
Yeah.
because you kind of all your anchor behaviors have sort of gone out of the window by the end, and it's a free for all. So final thoughts on that. I know you've touched on it a little bit, but what would you say to somebody bringing that challenge in?
Yeah, well, I certainly think again, seek out produce, right? Hit the salad bar. No matter where you are in the world, you're going to be probably near a market where you can even just grab some apples, some carrots, et cetera, so that you don't feel that you're eating heavy or heavily processed food 3 times a day, every day. I mean, that's one. So try to mix it up, right? Don't not just so-called restaurant food. But also, you might think, well, Adam, what you just described sounds like the culinary equivalent of going to confession, right? I've just had a long, hard day abroad, and now you're just saying eat some raw carrots. Well, you can still go to that salad bar, pick up some of the raw veggies, and they will probably have some flatbread or a tortilla or anything. Just wrap it up with a little vinaigrette, and all of a sudden it feels like a lovely little Mediterranean veggie wrap. So I'm not saying punish yourself. Of course, a big part of the book is how do we make nutritious food exciting? Because the funny thing is, it actually is exciting, um, and we're trying to marry the idea of the confluence of wellness, performance, and nutrition with helping ourselves develop some signature go-to things that we seek out, prepare, cook, and consume that help us with helping our life physically feel a little bit better throughout the day.
Ah, that's a great way to wrap up. I do have two little things I need to say on that. One, we went to Torquay as a family, and my son, there was very little. They don't have the best supermarkets even, and so my son was literally crying for carrots. Like he was like, "Get me some carrots," So
Yeah,
it's fun to see kids who have become accustomed to having
yeah,
produce and how they feel when they don't then have it. So that was cool. The other one was, at London Business School, when we're running programs and we're just eating constantly from their incredible restaurant, right? One thing that I used to always do is say, okay, I'm going to have the stuff that I don't have as much of at home. Like they've got such an array of fresh stuff. They've got such an array of good proteins, fish and chicken and stuff. So I'm just going to sort of make a beeline and enjoy the fact that that stuff is there. Because otherwise it's very easy, because the desserts are incredible, and, we want to enjoy all of that. But you also balance it by maybe having stuff you don't have as much of at home, or is not as
yeah,
easy to make at home. So
yeah.
yeah, I think that's a nice way to end for those situations as well. Thank you, Adam. This has been a great conversation, and I am really looking forward to diving into the book. Remind our listeners where they can get a copy and when they can get hold of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is called Executive Eats, the Cookbook for a Better Working Life. It comes out on the 16th of June, 2026, and it is already available on sort of all online book retailers. And after the 16th, I hope that you will even find it on the shelves of your favorite bookshop. It's available in hardcover, paperback, and ebook.
Brilliant. Well, go out and get your copy. It is definitely going to be something different compared to the typical cookbooks. We talked about it in the previous episode as well. So if you haven't listened to that yet, go back and have a listen to that. Adam, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a brilliant conversation. I've already got a few things that I'm going to go away and do and add to my habits and behaviors. And hopefully all of you listening have got a couple as well that you're going to go away and put into practice.
Thank you.
So yeah, great to have you, Adam, and bye-bye.